real and transparent and authentic. And to note that life is sometimes complicated and messy, and you are, as local government employees, more than just an employee, you're a person. And our story today really relates to that. I have with me two good friends of mine, and they are married to each other. Mike Thomson, who works for the Carrollton Fire Department, and his wife, Tiffany Thompson, who works for the town of Little Elm. And we have the privilege today of letting them tell their story about some really tough things that they have gone through, and particularly Tiffany in dealing with addiction to alcohol and how that story came about and what the recovery has been like, both for her and for Mike as her husband, and what how that's impacted things. And so I just invite you to sit back and I want to tell you that this is a really unrehearsed conversation. I know their story, but we did not go over, okay, say this and then you say that. So what you're going to hear at times may be very emotional, and it's always going to be very raw and real. And so I want to just start by saying to you, Tiffany and Mike, how much we appreciate your vulnerability and your transparency and your authenticity today, and being willing to share your stories. And so with that, let's start with you, Tiffany, and tell us a little bit about how did this addiction to alcohol come along, and kind of just share some of this story with us.
So this morning, Mike and I were talking, and I looked at him and I said, "So, what are you going to say?" And we were kind of like, "We don't necessarily know everything that we're going to say today." So, to your point, Mike, this really is just real, raw, vulnerable. I might cry, I might cuss. So just go along for it. If you're here for a perfect webinar, this is not your webinar. So go ahead and jump off if that's what you're expecting today. But first and foremost, we just prayed about it, is that the hope in all of this is to give someone hope. And if
Mhm.
that helps one person sharing the story, then that's exactly what the intent is today, is just to help somebody, because I wish I would have got help sooner, and that's one of the
Yeah,
big lessons.
that's a good point.
So I've always kind of steered away from alcohol because I have a very addictive personality. I'm a high achiever. I, seek out projects, things to do, that has served me very well in, my professional life, climbing the ladder, next position, next role, next promotion, type of thing. I really was a go-getter, kind of a golden child, just took advantage of all the opportunities. And so I just knew that about myself, that I have a very addictive personality. And so when I get locked into something, it's full throttle. We're going all the way. And this it started very innocently. We were
Mhm.
actually at a get together celebrating someone's promotion, who just got promoted to assistant city manager, and someone had a White Claw there, and I tried a White Claw for the first time. So spoiler alert, I became an alcoholic on White Claw. Yes, it can happen. So that was my drink of choice, and I liked it. It was, just light and fresh, and just super chill. And so the next day, I actually went and purchased. I think it was like a 6 pack. But what I liked the most about it, and I have to be careful not to romanticize, alcohol by any means,
Mhm.
was it calmed everything down for me, because I was
Mhm.
always in this constant go, go. It was really hard for me to kind of chill out. And
Mhm.
so I found that it gave me this false sense of calm. And
Mhm.
that is what I became addicted to. The alcohol was just the vessel, but I was really
Mhm.
seeking the calm. So it really was a slow fade, where it was always very private. I wasn't doing it in public. It was when, at the end of the day, I would just start drinking these White Claws, and the
Mhm.
frequency and the number just steadily kind of increased. And that went on
Mhm.
for about a year.
Yeah.
No real issues, just this drink that was giving me this again false sense of coping and dealing with things.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, Mike was really picking up on this and mentioned to me, he was just like, hey, I don't really like having alcohol at the house all the time. Maybe, we not have it here. And I love him. I honor him. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So then I didn't bring it to the house. And that's when started my hiding and my
Mm-hmm.
secrecy, because I had developed, I was addicted to it at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so that really was a trigger for me when I started hiding it. I would drink before I got home. I would show up, and one of the things you find out about yourself as an alcoholic is that you can hide the bottle, but you can't hide the behavior. And
Mm-hmm.
so it just started just spiraling, and just kept getting, worse and worse. However, at work, I was showing up at work. I was still the high performer. No one would ever
Mm-hmm.
know. They talk about high functioning alcoholic. Like no one knew. This was all in
Mm-hmm.
secrecy, all in
Mm-hmm.
secrecy. And, one of the big things, part of the story is at the time, I was actually the HR director for the
Mm-hmm.
city of Denton. And I was
Mm-hmm.
actually helping people with
Deal
addiction
with these
and getting
things.
them resources, and really was being a hypocrite at that point. So that just kept spiraling and
Let,
getting worse and worse. And me
let's
just
go to Mike on this, right? Though, before we go further in that, Mike, what was this like for you? How are you experiencing that?
So I think you got to give some context to what we were going through. I was the fire chief in Highland Village at the time, Tiffany's HR director in Denton, and this is in the middle of COVID. So you
Yeah.
can imagine the additional stress that's placed on us as
Yeah.
leaders in our cities. I'm dealing with the response emergency side of things, and how do you navigate as an emergency management coordinator a pandemic versus, and then Tiffany's an HR director that's continually trying to work and take care of 2,000 employees and all the changes that were happening on the HR side of things. And there was this immense pressure that was building up over time.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
and, and and Tiffany said it right. It was a slow fade. At first, it was no different because we'd had beer at the house. But it would usually sit in the fridge and get old and be thrown out because we just weren't not normal drinkers.
Hmm.
But I think what I noticed about it started off with a six pack, and then it would be a case, and then it would be a couple of cases in the fridge, and then but it would be it wouldn't just the box wouldn't get empty over time. It was just all of a sudden there was a new box there.
Quickly.
So
Yeah.
you could see the pattern, and that's what kind of got me going. I don't think I really recognized the pattern at first.
Hmm.
You don't think that's not the first place you go with someone you've been married to for 20 years at the time that, oh, they're an alcoholic. It's, oh, they're just having a few drinks and dealing with the stress. And but
Hmm.
eventually it got to that point where it felt like there was just more than it should be, more than normal.
Hmm.
That's when I asked her to not have any alcohol in the house anymore, because she was at the time working remote at home too. So that isolation, I think, also fed into the habit and how the addiction formed. And then, obviously when she started to hide it, that's when it really took off as far as the challenges, because she would, you know, she would choose different strengths of drinks. I mean, she's going to talk about that, probably going from the white can to the blue can because it's 4 times as strong as one white can, and it would be less to drink and hide before she got home. And then, but I noticed the change in behavior. Like it was just,
Hmm.
I could, and she can test this. I can smell it. I could smell the alcohol. I mean, I'm in
You
my
saw.
profession. I dealt with plenty of people that have patients that have um, had alcohol in their breath or been involved with accidents and things, and I could smell it, and I knew something was off, and it
Hmm.
just perpetuated itself. It just was like this machine. It just kept getting worse and worse and more often, and it wasn't every day at first either, right? It was some days there wouldn't be any drinking, and then other
Hmm.
days there would be, and
Yeah.
kind of looking back at it now, I can see there was not a lot of calm for municipal leaders during COVID, right? It
Oh,
was a
no.
stressful time navigating things that we've never had to navigate before. And all the pressure is on your shoulders. And you feel as a leader that you have to handle that pressure. You have to deal with it. You're here to support all your people. And I think, one of the lessons learned was we need to take care of ourselves too,
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
families. And
Because it's always a tough situation when local government's a very high pressure position, but y'all were both leaders, high level leaders in it, and both of you were. So, uh, all right, Tiffany, go back. You're talking about that spiral. Could you feel yourself spiraling downward?
I didn't realize how bad it had gotten until, every morning I'd wake up and I'd make a promise to my kids and Mike, like, I'm so sorry, this is going to stop. And I promised with all my being, I meant it every single
Mm-hmm.
time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, but, so I meant it and I would recalibrate, but 3 o'clock in the afternoon would hit. And when you're in active addiction, like the rationale, it just goes out the window. Your common sense, the things that you know better of, like I am
Mm-hmm.
a leader, I preach these things, I do these things for everyone else, but I would not do it for myself. And I
Yeah.
was swearing back to this secrecy, like it was our dirty, terrible little thing that no one can know. No one can know. And there is definitely different shades of darkness. And
Yeah.
so I think addiction absolutely wants to keep you in this grave of shame where no one else can find out about it. I mean, if you would have told me a couple years ago, hey, at one point you're going to go on a webinar that's recorded, you're going to go start public speaking about all the things you tried to hide the most about, I would have been like, absolutely not. But once you actually take that step to say, I do need help, that's when the healing will actually start happening. But sometimes, they talk about rock bottom, in addiction. And I'll very vividly remember the night where, Mike was in the closet with the light off, just sitting on the floor. And it was just like that kind of breaking point in our marriage. And I was just like, I said, man, I'm just going to go away for the night. I hate that I'm hurting you so much. And that night ended up being kind of that worst night where it all kind of came to head.
Yeah.
And that was incredibly tough because there's also the statistic, why women don't go get help either,
Mm-hmm.
because we feel like we can't go to rehab. I can't take a step away from the family because who's going to do all these things? And I'm going to miss
Right.
my girl's prom and all of those things. And so I ended up going to rehab and starting that process. But my rock bottom happened when I had to come and face that with the city
Mm-hmm.
manager, assistant city manager, because it became, a bit public what happened, and
Yeah.
I had to read in writing kind of what transparent what happened that night, completely sober, and I'm
Mm.
reading this version of myself that I don't even know who this person is. And I think that and just kind of losing my identity, that it's all about work. Like I am a human too, and I need help. And the hardest thing for an addict is to raise your hand and say, I need help. No one can do it for you.
Yeah.
No one can do it for you. So in 2025 was the most beautiful year of recovery for
Mm-hmm.
Mike and I. And at the end of
Mm-hmm.
2025, we had an opportunity that we could potentially put together some of this content and really start putting it out there like, hey, this is what this looks like and this is what we went through. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's what got us to where we're at today. January of this year, I posted the picture of me pinning Mike when he's getting his sworn in ceremony to be the fire chief of Carrollton. No one knows, very few people knew. A couple days, before that, I had just gotten out of rehab. But
Yeah.
that's not what I posted on the highlight reel. That's not what I posted on
Sure.
social media. It was just the facade, like everything's fantastic. And I'm like, I'm a broken person. And so that's when we were just like, we're going to really start putting this out here.
Yeah.
Um, so I,
So for you, I'm gonna go kind of go back. You ended up losing your job, right? That you had.
Well, I didn't. Well, what ended up happening was, I read, what happened, and it was just like a reassignment,
A
a
reassignment.
reassignment.
Okay.
And so I took that reassignment, and as hard as that was to take that reassignment, where I'm at now, that reassignment has been the greatest gift because
Mm-hmm.
that reassignment is my purpose, and purpose is not what you do, it's what happens to the people when you do the things you do. And
Yeah.
so I'm glad you brought that up because I ended up retiring from Denton in great stature, everything. I love my experience and the people that I got to work with in Denton. Left on an excellent note, went back from rehab, worked a little while, but then I retired and stepped out into fate. I didn't have another job lined up. And so I want to talk real fast about the town of
Yeah.
Little Elm because I retired from Denton, did not have another job lined up, really stepped out into faith with that. And I saw that the town of Little Elm had a culture position, someone that's really going to pour into people and develop them and recognize them. I was like, that's a really cool thing. So I went and looked, and they have this thing called the Cultural Roadmap at the town of
Yeah.
Little Elm. And I went and read it, and there's one thing I want to read. It'll take me a hot second, but it's worth
No
it. And
worries.
it talks about behaviors and beliefs, like what the town is about and what the leadership is about. But there's this one segment that said healing. The word healing really means to make whole. The search for wholeness is something shared by the servant leader and the followers. The servant leader is aware that in order for a person to grow professionally and personally, that person must first be whole and not broken.
Mm.
And that resonated with me. And I applied immediately. I didn't even finish the rest of the cultural map. I did read it later. But I was just like, that's something I want to be a part of because as leaders in organizations, it's very easy to talk the talk and say there's resources and say we do all these things and mental health and resilience is important. But what does that really look like? And I'll give you a very live example. In January, when I knew that we really wanted to start talking about that, Mike and I are both still serving in local government, and I'm sharing the story, and you may be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe she's saying this out loud that happened. So I asked my town manager and my leader, Matt Mueller and Caitlin Biggs, I said, I want to start sharing this story and I need to make sure that you're okay with it. And Matt's first thing to me said, oh, I thought this was bad news. That's amazing. Yes, go and do it. And so that support of sharing the story and that support of supporting what healing really looks like because recovery is messy. It's not
Mm.
like linear. It's up and down and hills and
Right.
valleys and um and just supporting Mike too, like starting to hear like how he compartmentalized and he's my best friend in the whole wide world and I put him through that. So there has to be a reason for the suffering and you just can't waste the suffering.
Mm. Yeah. Well, again, thank you so much for your transparency and um life is messy, and yet, we can see how um, good things have come out of this really difficult story. And I can't say enough about Matt Mueller and Caitlin. I think the world of both of them, and this is just one more example of great leadership and walking the talk
Yeah.
of servant leadership. And so, Mike, kind of talk to us then, like as Tiffany was going through rehab. What was that like for you?
Well, I want to touch a little bit back further before we went to rehab. When she was in the height of her addiction, as the spouse of an addict and as a fire chief firefighter, I've always been, my job is to contain and fix, right? Contain the problem, fix the problem. And
Mhm.
I tried to do that with Tiffany, right? To contain the problem to the family, keep it hidden and fix it. Well, quickly realized you can't fix this. This isn't just magically. It's not like a structure fire where you put water on the fire and the fire eventually goes out. There's so much more that goes on. And my cup got to the point where it was overflowing because I would get calls from my daughters during city council meetings where I was
Mhm.
about to go present saying that mom's drinking again. I came home from conferences at 3 in the morning because I found out that Tiffany was intoxicated. Um, and I got to a point where I had suicidal ideation and I acted on that
Mhm.
once.
Mhm.
And as a fire chief, suicide's a big thing in the fire service, and I have all these resources and I know all the people to call. But my mind was, that's for my guys, that's for my people, that's for the people that just had a bad call. It's not for me. I'm supposed to be have it all together. I'm supposed to be leading this team, this amazing team, and I'm supposed to be the strong one. And how false that of a narrative that was in my head because
Yeah.
burnout in leadership roles is real. And especially when you have a personal struggle you're working through and watching my best friend go through this and the pressure that was putting on our family and on me trying to be the parent to my daughters that when Tiffany couldn't be, and it was really truly a struggle. But we finally had the issue where the event came up where that got us so okay, we're going to go to rehab because I've been trying to get Tiffany to go to rehab for probably 4 months before, 4 or 5 months.
Hmm.
It was a relief for me that we were finally in a place where we were going to do this. I'll tell you that the day we dropped her off was probably the hardest day of my life.
Oh, I can only
We
imagine.
drive down to the hill country in Texas, and it was kind of a quiet drive, not a lot of talking, kind of just trying to get there on time. But the 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 rehab was the best thing that happened because it was the start of the healing process. I
Hmm.
think getting the professional help and having the environment in a way that helped Tiffany get to the point where we could start that healing process was important. But when I dropped her off, there was two things stood out to me. One was how quickly and how clinical it was. Basically we went in there, we paid, we did everything we needed to do, and then they said, "Okay, you can go now." And I'm about to leave my wife, who I've been with for 20 plus years. We haven't spent more than a couple days apart, and she was going to be in there for what could have been, I didn't know, 30, 60 days.
Yeah.
And of course, then I got to go home and try to do all the stuff that she does for the family, pay the
Mhm.
bills, all the stuff that I didn't typically do. So that was
And
one.
be a
And
fire
be a
chief.
fire chief. And I'll say I had great support from my city manager, Paul Stevens, in Highland Village at the time. He was
Hmm.
very supportive of me, and I had many conversations with him about what I needed to do. And the other thing that I remember that was very vivid is that week between when the event happened and she went to rehab was when I was actually doing the interviews for Carrollton. And I told Tiffany, I said, I don't think I'm in a place to go do these interviews because mentally I'm kind of all over the place. And she told me that I need to go, that she wasn't going to be the reason I was going to have this opportunity and everything. So I came and I did the interviews here in Carrollton during that week. And the last thing Tiffany said to me before we left was congratulations on, sorry, congratulations on getting the next fire chief job in Carrollton, which at the time, I didn't really think
You,
much of it. Um,
yeah,
but during her time while she was in rehab, I got the phone call, and you know, she spoke it into reality.
yeah.
And so, um,
Well, that's what I'm reminded of in this story is just the strength of relationships. And yes, alcohol addiction really strained it, I know, and my heart goes out to both of you, but also I'm really admire you both because obviously you had and have an incredibly strong relationship. And I know you have, we've talked about this, you have a really strong faith in the Lord. And those things and support, that helped you get through a really dark time. But man, I know it's hard, but I really respect and admire the strength in both of you.
well, thanks, Mike. It's funny, Tiffany and I were talking this morning, and it's one thing we hadn't really talked about through this process is marriage and divorce rates in public government, municipal government and high stress positions in the fire service. The
Yeah.
three things that make you a firefighter, you have to have a mustache, a truck, and be divorced. Those are the three kind of jokes that we make. And it's really not a
Uh,
very good joke, but it is what it is.
but it's pretty true. I know.
But you think about, maybe this helps people struggling in marriage to understand that there's help for them too. We've been on some pretty hard roads together,
Yeah.
but our faith in God and our relationship and our love for each other has really shown through all of the darkness. And we're stronger now than we've ever been. And we're at a point now, like Tiffany said at the beginning of this year, 2025 was a really good year because it's kind of the first year of full sobriety, like it's a year behind us.
Yeah.
And 26 was a year that we wanted to try to reach out. We finally got to a point where we feel like we can talk about it because it's
Mhm.
such a personal
Yeah.
topic, right? It's such a hard thing to talk about. And one of the things I was concerned about is I file things away in my head for just I do that for calls. I've done it my entire career, and I wasn't sure if I would remember all the details, because you don't want to remember them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But feeling that this is the time to tell our story, and maybe somebody that's struggling with an addiction, whether they're the person actively in that addiction or the spouse of that person or the partner of that person, or whether it is the marriage or the relationship that's struggling under the pressure of whatever life's bringing them. Maybe our story can be a light to them and help them find a path forward.
Oh, I'm sure it will be. And it's a reminder to us that even if we're not in that actively, we're working with and around someone that's got a struggle. It may or may not be resulting in addiction, but there's a lot of pain there. And Tiffany, I know, you kind of had to rebuild from the ground up. How has that changed the way now approach your job and your life?
It's changed everything. That talk about the reassignment. It really has been a reassignment for life. Like I know what is important. My faith comes first. My sobriety comes first. And I know without a doubt, like I cannot keep my sobriety if I don't give it away.
Hmm.
I, I have to keep giving it away and I have to live that every single day. And it's just been so encouraging. I mean, how God gives you these winks when he's like, all right, you're doing a good job, my child, when we were just like, okay, let's really put it out there. And we did that. And just so y'all know, I am not like an influencer or anything on social media. It's primarily about my dogs and kids and hot pants. That's what I call Mike. But when I
We
made
we didn't need to know that, but okay.
you're not the hot pants Mike Mowry, Mike Thompson, hot pants. However, when I made that post January 1st, 2026, about what really was going down, a couple years prior, I could kind of see what was happening behind the scenes. And I just have, a couple friends on social media, but it showed me like how far it reached. And it was like 25,000. And then all these direct messages started coming in
Hmm.
from people that I know that are struggling as well. And they're like, finally, someone is talking about it. Like someone that I can relate to, someone that's not going to be perfect, someone that's going to have a snot bubble as they're crying on a webinar. Like I need someone that is like me. And also, not only just leaders in organization, but just employees and
Yeah.
humans. And
Yeah.
you brought up such a great point, Mike, is that someone around you is being touched actively or past from addiction, from something. And I always thought I knew better. And that was one of my aha moments when I was going through. I was like, I couldn't believe this was happening to me. I was 40
Hmm.
years old when I became an alcoholic. It
Hmm.
happened later on in life, and I couldn't believe that it was happening to me. I should be able to fix this, but me thinking I can do it on my own and making Mike keep this secret of ours, man, it just kept us in this dark, dark place. And so, darkness cannot survive when you bring it to the light. And there's something so
Hmm.
beautiful about bringing something so private to public,
Yeah.
which is what we're
It
doing.
it loses the that darkness and its grip on you loses its grip. I had a counselor that told me once, and I know you've probably heard this in other places. You can only be as healthy as your secrets allow you to be.
Mm,
And he was so right, and we've had those problems in our own marriage where we were keeping secrets, and boy, they tear up the foundation of that relationship. And but when you bring it out in the open, then it loses its power.
yes. And, whenever I was no one, coming forth and making this very public and really putting yourself out there, right? You worry about people judging you. Are they going to think differently of you? Should you be in the role that you're in? So you start thinking about all these like imposter, like I should not be doing this. But there is no one, and this is me talking to the addict or someone struggling. There is
Yeah.
no one that is going to be harsher than that person is on themselves.
Yeah.
No one in this world was harsher than I was on myself. Like nobody. So once I have that self realization, I'm like, once I start loving myself again
Hmm.
and seeking out, raising my hand, saying I need help, then I remove all that from everyone else because it's not about them. It's about my sobriety, my relationship with my husband, being a kick ass mother to my daughters, and showing up for work and serving the town of Little Elm and doing all the cool things. I mean, that's what this is about now. And
Yeah.
so I am so thankful for that reassignment. That reassignment saved my life.
Isn't that neat how you just thought that probably at the time felt really rough, but boy, look what it's opened up for you.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think one of the things I'm taking away from this conversation is it's not a sign of weakness to ask for help.
Mm.
Not
And
at all.
we often feel that way, don't we?
Yeah. And I think, Mike, one point I just want to make sure we touch on is I think people, especially high achievers or people in government, tend to put their identity in their work.
Hmm.
And when you have your identity in your work, you try to protect that identity. And that's what happened to me as a fire chief. I didn't
Yeah.
want anybody to think less of me for what I was going through. And I think really people really need to understand work is what we do. It's not who we are. And who we are for me is a beloved son of God and a father and a husband. That's my identity. It's
Yeah.
not the fact that I'm a fire chief. A fire chief, I love what I do for a living. I love getting to serve the city of Carrollton, the incredible residents we have here, and the incredible staff we have here. But that's not who I am. It's what I do. And I think we need to make sure that it's okay for people to understand that you need to put your family first and put yourself first before your work, because so often we put our work first and foremost in our life, and that's the focus. And that's just not a healthy place to be. I
Yeah.
don't.
I think so. I think what you do in local government is hard enough as it is. And then when you put so much weight on that's my identity, it's just unfair to you as a human.
Yeah.
And so, well, let me say this has been a great conversation, and I so appreciate your bravery and your just grittiness to share. Tiffany, I want to like kind of throw the ball to you and say, what would you say that person that's like, this may be me, or I might know somebody like this, based on all that you've went through and where you are now, what would you say to them?
You're absolutely worthy of help. And to finally have enough courage to raise your hand is the hardest thing you will do, but it's the beginning of everything new.
Yeah.
And I mean, we talk about it a lot where Mike could have not wanted me to get sober any more than, I have to want it and I
Hmm.
have to be ready. And that's really hard to love someone when they're not ready to actually take that chance, but also just recognizing how hard it is for someone to raise their hand. And when you raise that hand, and if you're on the other side of that person who's raising the hand to you, that is a very precious, precious moment. And how you respond to that person could absolutely save their life.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I just want to give that perspective as the person who is wanting to be brave enough to raise their hand, but just doesn't know if it's time or can they. Like, I'm cheering you on, raise your hand.
Yeah.
And then if you're on the other side, like, just the power you have to change someone's life with how you respond to them saying, I need help.
Yeah. Well, that's so well said and so powerful. And I just again thank you so much. And I want to say to those of you that are watching, we'll send out the link to this and if an email address for Mike and Tiffany if you want to reach out to them. I know they'd be happy to talk with you and help you in any way that they can, as well as we would here at SGR. So Tiffany, Mike, thank you again so much. This has been really what I wish that everybody could hear. And we wish you guys the best. I know you're going to be sharing this story in some other places. And I'm hoping that it will just be something that is used to minister and to help and encourage uh, thousands and thousands of people. So Thanks again. Thanks for everyone that's been a part of this webinar. Lisa Shook in the background, making sure everything happens, and especially to Tiffany and Mike Thomson. Hope you guys have a great rest of the day, rest of the week. Reach out to someone if you need to.